So let's talk about treating your room, sound treating that is. Sound treating and soundproofing are completely different. I hear all the time people say, I need to soundproof my room. Do you know what it takes to soundproof a room? Floating walls, foot layer of concrete, doors that cost $1,000. I don't think that's what you're talking about. You're talking about sound treating it, which means making it sound better for when you record or more accurate for when you're mixing. So there's a few different ways to treat a room. Mainly, there's absorption and diffusion. So let's talk about absorption. You can buy these online, eBay, for pretty cheap. Auralex is a good name brand, or you can use the no-name brands, which is what I like, more affordable. This essentially absorbs sound. Sound is like water, right? So think about this. When you clap in a cave, it goes cue audio sample of cave clap, thank you. And then when you clap in a hallway, cue audio sample, clap, 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 clap. It's a flutter echo, right? Well, what's the difference between the two? In a alleyway, the walls are parallel and the sound is bouncing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. In a cave, the rocks are everywhere. It's almost like if you were to splash water at it, it would just disperse into mist. The sound is doing the same thing. So when you absorb the sound, it actually doesn't bounce at all. It just clap, hits the wall, and it's gone. Like how a ShamWow just sucks up water, these suck up the sound. But there's something to consider here. This only sucks up certain frequencies because every frequency has a length. High frequencies take only that long to propagate, and low frequencies take a long time to propagate, which means this can absorb everything in the high to mid-range, but not in the low end. So how do you treat the low end? Absorption. That's very thick. They call those bass traps. Want to know the best bass trap you can use right now for cheap, if not free? Your couch. Stack couches in the room. Bass likes to propagate in the corners. That's where it resonates. So get big bass traps and put them in the corners. Now, when you're dealing with thicker treatment, that's not just a couch, but actually professional solutions, I would recommend Owens Corning 703 or 706. That is rigid fiberglass. That absorbs sound very well. You can make gobos and all types of good absorption acoustic tools. So we talked about absorption. Now let's talk about diffusion. Diffusion is different. Let's go back to the cave scenario. All those little rocks that are poking out, when the sound hits them and the sound disperses, whoops, that's diffusion. The cave is doing diffusion. So you can do diffusion in your own room. In fact, we included some links of cave-like, for the sake of this analogy, DIY diffusers. So when you have different objects at different lengths popping out of the wall, the sound hits them and bounces off and reflects in a different angle. It doesn't come right back to the listener. So you can do that by absorbing, or you can do that by diffusing. And I think, and most acousticians would agree, that a happy medium between the two is great. If a room is covered in absorption, it will just sound very muffled. It'll sound too muffled and not realistic. If there's too much diffusion, it might be too lively. So you want a good, healthy combination of absorption and diffusion. And of course, you want that to add up to a point where the room is balanced on an EQ spectrum. It's a flat response. That is the goal. We don't want any harmonics building up, and we don't want nodes or antinodes. So let's talk for a second about what a node is. If sound travels at me in a sine wave and hits me, if I'm a wall, it's going to bounce right back at you. It's going to bounce back at you, either reinforcing itself, making it louder, or canceling itself out. And that's happening across an entire frequency from 20 hertz all the way to 20 kilohertz, 20,000 hertz. It's very easy to tame high frequencies with cheap absorption, hard to tame low frequencies, because what's going on is nodes and antinodes, reflections, and just a mess of sound. So we did include, just like in the other video, a room calibration tool and software you can use, and also some links to DIY absorption and DIY diffusion. And last but not least, we included something that really helps you position where you put your monitors in your room. It's very important to consider the shape of your room. You don't want parallel walls. So if you see pro studios, they're built where every wall is an angle. That way you don't get the flutter effect that I talked about. You don't get early reflections, which I'm going to talk about in another video. But this link that we provided not only includes room calibration, absorption, and diffusion, but it also shows you where to place your monitors based on the dimensions of your room. All of these little things make towards a more balanced, flat response mixing environment and will help your mixes translate outside of the studio and sound good on every other system. Absorption, diffusion. Get it? Got it?